Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to welcome you to the fourth session of the Keep Safe Summer Series Community Engagement. And we're so happy to be here with a great team of folks that worked on our Keep Safe guide on the community section, as well as on the Communities Together guide. This is an important and timely conversation for this moment in history where communities mean everything to each other, and we have to make sure that we have the tools to make sure that we are able to support each other. Next slide, please. We're welcoming hundreds of folks from around Puerto Rico and around the country, the U.S. and around the world to talk about this critical theme. I want to first thank El Vocero and Simpson Strong Tie, our two sponsors for the Keep Safe Summer Training Series, as well as many partners, including the AIA Puerto Rico, Mercy Corps, Perkins and Will, Builders Association, ReImagina Puerto Rico, as well as countless others that we're bringing together to produce this important series. Next slide. Enterprise Community Partners brings together developers and investors to create homes that are connected to opportunity. We try to create affordable housing through provision of capital and solutions and policy that will help promote resiliency and safe and affordable housing. Next slide, please. Here's a very important map we'd like to show you, and the reason why this theme of resilient and safe housing is so important. We know that so many households in Puerto Rico are facing an incredible economic crisis. In 2017, the per capita income of many households was a little bit over $12,000, and the median household income was about $19,000, with estimated renters having about $12,000 of income a year. What this means is that many households are one paycheck away from homelessness. It's important to recognize that over so many renters, so many households are paying over 40%, 50%, 60% of their household income on rent or mortgages, which means if there's a repair to be made, or if there is a serious impact to the home, a lot of households just can't afford to pay for the fix or for the repair. So it's critical that we get together before an event to make sure that households have the important resources and tools needed to mitigate these impacts. Next slide. The risk coming forward to us is from every direction. Right now, we've got millions and millions of households around the world dealing with COVID and asking them to shelter in place. And we also have seen that COVID has also created a turndown in tourism, which has led to incredible economic fallout. And ultimately, many households are displaced from this risk. We also have storms and a very active hurricane season in the Atlantic, as well as earthquakes that have really impacted so many communities in southern Puerto Rico. And as we speak, there are tens and tens of thousands from around the United States, specifically in California, running from the fires that have basically overtaken the state of California. So this is a moment where we all have to reconcile with the fact that there are many risks that we're facing. We need to figure out how to solve and mitigate the impacts on our houses and our communities. Next slide. And many communities, as we know, have lived with the systemic denial of various services by federal agencies. And so many communities are in harm's way to begin with because of the disinvestment that has happened, rampant racism and redlining that has created a situation of unsustainability for many communities. And so even amidst all of this hazard and risk, so many communities have come together. Strong communities have banded together to work and support each other throughout this time and are more resilient as a result. Next slide, We developed the Keep Safe Housing Guide with many partners across Puerto Rico to help inform what resiliency looks like in Puerto Rico for housing, as well as other island communities that need support on safeguarding housing. Together with so many partners from across Puerto Rico, we were able to build a guide that we're proud of, that will help provide you practical solutions for your housing. Next slide. Guide, just like this program, starts with a sequence of things that you need to know in order to build and design safe housing, starting with your site and identification of risks. We reviewed this with Ada Monzon and Maria Roldan a couple weeks ago. Then we moved into protection, how to build a safe roof and foundation and walls and structure. Then we move into energy and water systems. And last week we covered Jonathan Marvell and Paul Faracelli. How do we build resilient and sustainable power systems, as well as sustainable water systems and septic? And then next week, moving into passive habitability with Dr. Fernando Peña. These are systems that can be built without electrical input. The next slide, the next series, we're going to get putting it together. How do we build and pay and contract for these important strategies? And today, we're going to be talking about how to bring together the community and build out community resiliency. The series is essentially targeted to understanding critical actions and strategies that can increase resiliency during design, construction, and operation. Also to help you identify best practices, models, and housing and community-based resiliency strategies. And we also will create a virtual community with all of you to get the word out, to share lessons learned, and ultimately, how do we build resilient housing? Next slide now. And today's goals are essentially to share best practices in community resiliency, to help understand how other communities throughout Puerto Rico are modeling this, and then ultimately how to build a community resiliency hub to support your community. Next slide. There are some opportunities coming before us right now. We've got 4 particular opportunities that I wanted to share with you before we go to our trainers. Next slide, please. The 4 training opportunities are, number 1, Yanel, if you could turn to the next slide, please. Okay. Number 1, we have the CDBGDR MIT program that Vivienda has sponsored. This is a program that's allocated close to $8.25 billion for Puerto Rico's mitigation. And this is all coming forward now. Next week, there's going to be a seminar for community input to help ensure that community participation is included in the planning of this funding. The next opportunity is with the CDBGDR funding that's coming forward. The Foundation for Puerto Rico has launched a convening this week to help build community input for the spend down of this DR funding. So each of the 78 municipalities across Puerto Rico will be provided with support to provide input into this program. The third opportunity is FEMA has launched a Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program called BRIC, and Vivienda will be, and other agencies will be looking to build a program and application for this agency program that will help support resiliency across Puerto Rico. This is a competitive award that communities from throughout the United States and Puerto Rico will be allowed to apply for. And then finally, FEMA has a flood mitigation assistance program that is available to support communities across Puerto Rico. And this is also going to be available, and you'll be hearing more about this as we go forward. I want to, before I turn to our speakers, just share with you a slide, a quote from a dear colleague and mentor of mine, Jane Jacobs, who says, "I don't watch my neighbors, I see them. We make our community safer together." And this is really about the testament to community resiliency and how communities need to really support each other and be able to fundamentally have an eye on the street so that communities can protect each other. And we are talking about this theme at a time where many communities are dealing with the turn down in the economy, businesses have been lost, and there are less eyes on the street. So it's important that we have this conversation today to really understand what to do. Next slide, please. I just want to introduce our speakers today. I want to first introduce Yanel. Yanel is a good dear partner of ours on this project, on the Keep Safe project, and she is also the founder of Resiliency, which is an effort to help support communities from across Puerto Rico develop resiliency solutions, and now across the world, bringing her know-how as a leader at Perkins and Will on resiliency, and as a leader in the architecture world on this team. We're so happy to have you with us today. Thank you for joining. Marlo Blaskas is the executive director of ReImagine Puerto Rico, an effort that was started with the Rockefeller Foundation many, many years ago after Maria, to really lead Puerto Rico's resiliency forward. And under her leadership, she's been able to produce incredible strategies and solutions and convenings to support and forward the resiliency and the revitalization of Puerto Rico. Karla Peña is the director of Mercy Corps in Puerto Rico. She brings to us an incredible wealth of knowledge from her experience on the ground working with communities from across Puerto Rico and in many parts of the world to promote resiliency and housing solutions. And so thank you all for coming to us today to speak about this important topic. Next slide. OGMA, I would be remiss in not thanking our dear translators, Selena and Nicole from OGMA, a woman-owned firm in San Juan. They've been incredible. They've helped translate our book and are with us today to translate our voices for you. Next slide. I want to also say, before we turn to our speakers, these sessions will offer you credit. The AIA is providing credit for each session, as well as the Colegio Arquitectos that will be providing credit to Puerto Rico-based architects. You'll also get PDH credits if you attend the sessions, and we'll offer those to you afterwards. And for everyone else, you'll get a certificate of attendance from Enterprise Community Partners. With that, and without further ado, I want to say thank you all for joining us, and I would like to turn to Malu.
Thank you, Lori. Hi all, my name is Marlo Blaskas, and I was the executive director of ReImagina Puerto Rico. And ReImagina Puerto Rico, a nonprofit initiative looking to promote the resilient reconstruction of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. So various nonprofits, Enterprise, ReImagina, Mercy Corps, and Resiliency from Perkins and Will, we all got together and worked together on this guide. And what is it? It's a resilient community center design guide for islands. And this guide is directed mainly to community leaders and community leaders throughout the island. Whether you have a community center facility or you want to design one, this guide will help you. Okay, so it's basically, the idea with the guide is to inform the design of resilient community centers to strengthen organizational capacity, promote year-round education, and withstand environmental, social, and economic changes. The guide offers practical suggestions how to develop operational ability and relevant physical assets like solar panels and water cisterns to achieve resilience. So we had a lot of community centers throughout Puerto Rico, and community centers usually provide social and educational services throughout the years to their communities. And the idea is, after Hurricane Maria, as you probably all know, due to the great amount of devastation caused by Hurricane Maria, it was really the community organizations and the nonprofits who really supported the communities and not the government. So little by little, with the difficult experiences we had, we received a lot of help, and a lot of community centers started to become more resilient in providing services and support to their communities. Next slide, Yanel. So to give you an idea, this guide, the first part of the guide talks about community organization. It's very important to have a strong leadership and a strong community organization to develop and maintain a resilient community center. Part 2 talks about operating a resilient community center. And part 3 talks about the physical assets and elements in a resilient community center. And then part 4 basically talks about 8 case studies, 8 community centers that between us, these organizations we visited or either supported. Okay, so this guide is available in Spanish and in English and you can access under the Enterprise homepage. Next slide. Now I'll turn it over to Karla.
Hi everyone. My name is Karla Peña. I'm the director for Mercy Corps Puerto Rico. And as part, we've been working in Puerto Rico since 2017, right after Hurricane Maria. And one of our main programs has supporting community centers in their transformation to become a resilience hub or resilience center. So I want to provide you some information from the experience of the field. You always can find more information in the manual. So I'm just going to highlight from the experience that we had working with over 15 community centers, some highlights. What is a resilient hub? I think there are three important things to mention. Resilience is defined in different ways, in different technical ways, but for a resilient hub, there are three things that I want to mention. One is that a resilient hub is a place that is recognized by the community. It's a place that the community members and the families are familiar with, and they know that in the scenario of an emergency, they can go there and access services, information, etc. Another important thing is that a resilient hub is usually operated by a community-based organization or an organization that on regular times offers services to the community. But many of it can be a school, it can be a church, it can be a CBO, but it has that a community service component all year long. And then the third one that you can see more information in the current slide is the resources and the capacity that center, that resilient hub, but also the organization has. And there are key resources that a community center or a school or a resilient hub needs. And a few of them are access to reliable energy, a solar system. We see many of them with solar system energy, a reliable connection during an emergency scenario, community gardens that are connected to a community kitchen. And you can see more on the resources and equipment needed in the slide, but I wanted to highlight that it's really important that the community-based organization or the organization that is operating the resilient hub has the capacity to ensure that all those equipments and the resilient hub operates in the long run. Next slide, please. And then a key important part or piece about a resilient hub is definitely the community organization. And I can tell you a story about right after Hurricane Maria, a few weeks after the hurricane, I was working as part of the emergency response, and I went to Blazquez, an island municipality in the east side of Puerto Rico that was severely affected, but also dealing with additional challenges because they were disconnected to the main island. I remember the first time I visited one of our local partners, Feque Transforma. At that moment, they were operating from a small rented place in town. And if you go to Feque Transforma today, you'll see a resilient center that is way different than what I saw during those first weeks after Hurricane Maria. Although after Hurricane Maria, they were supporting their community members and providing critical services. If you go now to the Resilient Hub, you will find that they have all the resources, all the equipment, but also the capacity to, in the scenario of an emergency, ensure that vulnerable families in Blazquez have access to critical resources. So to ensure and always have the mindset that a resilient hub should work long-term, community organization is critical, community leadership is critical, and also community participation from community members and families and their support is critical. Next slide, please. And then again, when we talk about the making sure that the Resilient Hub operates year around, I think it's important to always take into consideration that supporting a resilient hub should always be about and making sure that the organization has the capacity on the long run to continue the operation of that resilient hub, okay? So when we talk about long-term and we talk about the model of the resilient hub, there is a transformational change where we see that a community-based organization has the resources to respond directly to their community members. There is an important coordination with other actors and stakeholders as the government and other organizations, but to ensure that the operation is on the long term. But I think it's really important to understand how the systematic change is there, where you find an organization that has the commitment to support the families in most need in the scenario of an emergency, and how they can access the resources that, additional to working all year around, they can support them in the scenario of an emergency. That's it for me. Over to you, Malu.
Thank you, Karla. And I think it's important to note that we recognize that not every community will have the ideal building, the ideal resources to be able to, put together a community center. So the guide really thinks about this in two ways. It recognizes that maybe there is a modest building that could provide permanent spaces, but that there are temporary things that could happen to expand that capacity of the community center. So in this diagram, and I want to give a shout out to two Puerto Rican architects who helped put together these excellent diagrams, Ismael Segarra and Maria Roldan. You can see in this drawing that inside the building, there are components that can remain year-round, as Karla mentioned: a community kitchen, a multi-purpose room, an administrative office, and so on. And you can see that outside of this building, there are some temporary tents that can be deployed when the capacity of the building needs to expand. And that could be, as we very well saw during Hurricane Maria, it could be temporary kitchens to serve the community. And in the same way, in that diagram that was shown at the beginning that Karla explained, which were the critical elements of a community center, the building itself needs to be supported by a series of systems that allow that center to be resilient, because dependency on electricity or water, it could be connected, but the reality is that it could become completely independent at times of emergency. So the systems are listed here, from communications to energy storage and generation, water supply. I want to make sure that we talk also about the structural system, particularly with the earthquakes that we have been experiencing since January, that whether the building is made out of concrete or wood, if it's done correctly, that structure should be supporting, as the codes demand, either forces by wind or earthquake. And something that for me is really important is the notion that in an emergency, even if you have power through batteries or even a generator, you want to conserve that energy to the critical things, such as the refrigerator that has medications and so on. So what I think is important is the concept of passive survivability, that you are able to open windows, that you are able to keep the temperature and the breezes going through the building, so that you don't have to put more weight and demand on the resources that you already have. And I think Malu very well mentioned that this could be an existing facility or it could be a new building. We have seen many examples of schools or other types of buildings that have been retrofitted. We put together this model, and it's really, think about it as a kit of parts or as an example of what are the critical elements. So here you see the building from the outside, you see the PV panels, the solar thermal, for domestic hot water on the roof, a cistern, whether it is on the roof or on the side, you see the community garden, the generator, and so on. And now let's take a look inside. We believe these are critical spaces for the community, but those programmatically could be expanded. There could be many more spaces that could be supporting the community center. And today, we are seeing that many of these community centers could also become shelters in time of emergency. And if that was the case, obviously the spaces provided need to be many, many more. Malu?
Yes, thanks, Jenna. So part 4 of the guide presents 8 case studies of different community centers, community organizations that we visited or supported. So we present 8 case studies, and if you see here on the map, we identify where they are in Puerto Rico, and we gave them, our intent was not to rate them. I mean, we wanted to let everybody know where they are. Some of them have worked really hard since Hurricane Maria and are now completely resilient and have all the elements that we identify in the guide. Others are in the process and have certain elements, but are in their process to get there. So as you can see, for example, Daguao is one example that we're going to showcase now and talk a little bit about. That is one that has become completely resilient and has all the elements that we've identified. There are others as well. Of all the 8 case studies, all of them had already physical locations, I think with the exception of Tuabaja. Is that right, Yanel? Tuabaja is one of the community organizations that kind of formed themselves after the experience of Hurricane Maria, because of the need as a community to work together to find solutions. They created the organization and have started working since then. The rest were already formed and just became more resilient after Hurricane Maria. So just to talk a little bit about Daguao, which is in Naguabo. Here's a picture of they have several buildings, and they are one of the organizations that has, they are owners of their land and of their buildings, and they actually rent out some of the buildings to a Head Start. So they do have some recurring revenue that comes in to help them maintain and operate this center. Next slide. Here, this is one of the organizations, and it's led by Abi Colon, which is a very strong leader, community leader. Has been a very strong community leader for many, many years. And that's why this organization is so strong and so successful, because of its strong leadership. They were able to receive a lot of help after Hurricane Maria from Para la Naturaleza, from Resilient Power Puerto Rico, from Mercy Corps, and others that helped them. So they received help and support in different elements from different organizations. And Karla will talk a little bit more, just in a little bit, about how Mercy Corps supported them. But for example, Para la Naturaleza and Resilient Power were able to give them the solar panels and did the whole installation of the batteries, of the Tesla batteries and the solar panels. And Para la Naturaleza also did the water cistern. And they also got some Go phones for backup communication. And now I think I'll hand it over to Karla, who can talk a little bit more about how Mercy Corps supported Daguao.
Thank you, Malu. Yes, as Malu was mentioning, I think Daguao is a good example of how an organization, a community-based organization, can get the resources and the support from different partnerships. So Mercy Corps was one of the organizations that supported Daguao, but I think it's important to highlight how important is the community organization for that for them to find the right partnerships and ensure that they can become a resilience center. The support that Mercy Corps provided is for some of the equipment, but we do a lot of emphasis on capacity building and making sure that there is a promotion of the collaboration between the community-based organization and other emergency agencies, as well as how the organization, now that has all the resources, can ensure that in the scenario of an emergency, they go straight to those families that are in most need. So for that, there are trainings, several meetings all year around that Mercy Corps supports DAGWAUT and other organizations. Over to you, Malu.
So here are some more pictures. Here we see in the bottom is Abicolon, the leader, on the roof with the solar panels. To the right is when I went with my team from ReImagina to visit the community center with some of the staff there. And here you see some elderly people who are participating from the community, who are participating in the elderly program they're offered at the center. Next slide. As you can see here, you can see a picture of the Tesla batteries, the water cistern, the community garden. You can see, the Go phones, the backup communication systems. They did an excellent job also of mapping their whole community to the point where they identify all the houses, all the residents, who are the vulnerable residents, who are the people who have a certain illness or condition, and what medications these people need. So that's what they have decided to try to store: basic supplies and basic medicine for these people. One thing I'd like to point out, these are some more pictures of DAGWAUT, is that now in the last year, actually the Puerto Rico Emergency Management Administration realized, how community organizations were so important after Hurricane Maria, that they decided to develop agreements with certain community organizations. And DAGWAUT is one of them who's already has a signed agreement with Prima here at Puerto Rico. So in the case of a hurricane, for example, if we're we're going to be in imminent danger of receiving a hurricane, Prima is supposed to distribute basic supplies and food to DAGWAUT, to the community center in DAGWAUT, so they could help support and distribute the food and supplies to their community. So it is my understanding that approximately more than 30 agreements have been signed between Prima and community organizations to assist them in this distribution and support after a hurricane. Next slide, I think. One more, yeah. And there's some picture of Yanel and her team visiting Avi and DAGWAUT. As you can see in the bottom, it's a community map. There we go. I passed it on to Yanel.
Thank you, Malu. I really love this picture of the community mapping exercise, which is so critical to understanding their context and serving the community members. I think if we were to leave one message today with you, is that community planning and preparedness for emergency is really a year-round process. And it is a co-creation process in which everyone has a voice, and all the multiple perspectives, when they are included, they make for a very rich community project with a better understanding of what are the services that need to be provided. In the Keep Safe guide, one of the chapters covers how this community planning process happens year-round. And you can see here that for a community leader, this could be a helpful tool to understand from visioning, identification of the problems that they need to solve, how to go about determining plans and implementing those plans. There is a cycle to this, and there is a process. It's very critical that if the community is organized, that it can respond quickly in a matter of days. Those first few hours, first few days after an emergency, So if the response is clear to them and it's coordinated, it has been rehearsed, it's much easier to go into the relief process as the emergency evolves. And of course, reconstruction and renewal and adaptation, it's something that, you know, follows and is a continuous process. We want to make you aware that these resources are now online, and this particular chart that I just shared is in this link, as well as mentioned earlier, the Keep Safe guide and this community guide, which is really a complement to Keep Safe, are all downloadable in Enterprise Community Partners website. I believe that's all we have to present, and we are ready to take questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to put something I wanted to mention is that Lori mentioned it at the beginning. You know, there's a lot of CDBG-DR funds. This is for Puerto Rico specific. What I'm going to say is there's a lot of funds, CDBG-DR, and there's a whole funds that are going to be for the whole community resilience planning that Foundation for Puerto Rico is going to do. But also under CDBG-DR, there's under the infrastructure program, there's money assigned for the development of resilient community centers. That program hasn't started yet. They're in the process of acquiring the program manager, but there will be significant amount of funds to continue supporting the development of resilient community centers. So keep your eyes out.
Excellent. I can switch to stop presenting so you can see our faces. And Andrea, I'm not sure how we can take questions. I haven't been monitoring this since I was sharing my screen.
There's a few questions in the Q&A that I'm happy to read for you.
Please.
So the first question is, well, will this presentation be available after the webinar? And yes, we can send that out. Who are the main providers for the funds for these community centers?
Well, I'll start off. You know, many of these community centers operate with their own funds, but as I said, a lot of nonprofit organizations after Hurricane Maria provided the funds or the resources to help them become resilient. And so a lot of them acquired the cisterns, the solar panels, and the batteries, and the phones, and a lot of the resources, thanks to the help and support of a lot of nonprofits such as Mercy Corps. As I said, there are going to be CDBG-DR funds, which are federal funds that are administered through Vivienda for Puerto Rico. The program hasn't started yet, but there will be funds available to support the development of resilient community centers.
And can I add to that? Something that also is really important is that the organization that wants to become a resilient hub or is in that process also has some sustainability, not depending on the funding sources for the equipment. What we've seen is that some of the organizations use their community gardens for donations and additional income, and they have a different business model to ensure that they do like a monthly base income generation that in a way ensures that they are sustainable in a long run.
And one more thing that we have seen around the island is the decommissioned schools that were there, closed, have been given to these community organizations to be able to have a place to host these programs. So that is a great resource and a great recycling of facilities that were already developed. Perhaps now we know that those buildings need a thorough structural assessment to make sure that they are earthquake resistant, because we now know very closely that that is a risk, not something written in the text, but something that we are living through. Other
Next question.
questions?
Yeah. Are the workers of these community centers purely volunteer?
I can answer that question. Some of the resilient hubs that we've been working with, and some of the study cases mentioning in the guide, they do have volunteer work, but also many of them have the capacity to access federal funds or government funds or donations, and there are key positions that are also funded. And additional to that, as I mentioned before, some of them have a business model that ensure that they have the resources to employ key staff. There are other smaller organizations that do depend on volunteer work.
Next question. Can you describe the coordination process with the local authorities and building code officials?
Do you want to talk about that WAW as an example to answer that question? Or should I take it?
Are you talking to me, Yanel, or Malu?
Or Malu.
Okay.
I know go ahead.
I can tell about the coordination with the government authorities, and that's a key component, a key piece to ensure that a community center becomes a resilient hub, because there is a need for coordination with the government and emergency agencies. So what we've seen is a lot of training opportunities where there is a space for the community organization and the government to join forces and learn together, but also community or meetings in the community with the authorities to have like that pre-emergency coordination completed. And that happens year around. Yeah, that's a very important part.
And then in regards to codes and meeting those, not every municipality in Puerto Rico has a planning department or a department that enforces codes. Bigger cities such as San Juan, they do. I will say that the key here is that the facility, if it has been given to the community, as in many examples, it is an agreement that is signed between the municipality and that community. And it's usually a long-term lease, 30 years, 50 years, for, you know, a nominal amount of money or no money, if the transaction, you know, could be $1 just to make the transaction happen. But the idea is that it is legally coordinated, and that the organization that runs it has a good standing as a credible organization.
Next question. Can you describe the types of underutilized community assets that might become community resilience hubs?
Yeah, like Yanel said earlier, we've closed in Puerto Rico. A lot of schools have closed in the last couple of years. So, and even before that, some of the community centers that exist today are old schools. So a lot of them are old schools, and some, I know that there are, with the closure in the last couple of years of a lot of schools, a lot of them were trying to gain access and control of them. It hasn't been an easy process, and I know, but yeah, those basically, instead of that school being closed there and you know, and creating more problems, it's better for it to be operated and maintained by a community organization, and have those, you know, that facility provide services and get to use. You know, a lot of these community organizations provide services to the elderly, provide support, tutoring, and help kids after school with their homework. And so it's perfect for this type of facility, for this service.
In some urban conditions, we have seen commercial spaces that were there, maybe closed, and the community is able to gain access through either the municipality or directly with an owner that is willing to provide that facility as an asset. Other things that we're seeing, particularly us working in Guanica, a collaboration between Resiliency and Voluntariado de Puerto Rico. We are working on converting 3 different sites in community centers, and 2 of them happen to have a basketball court that it's covered. So those 2 structures need to be reinforced, maybe even rebuilt depending on the structural condition that we find. We're in that process now. And a very modest building will be added to it. And the idea is that this is the year-round community center, and that big space, which is the basketball court, could become a place of refuge, what FEMA refers to as a safe community room, and they can access those funds. So, you know, if I am in a community, I will just look around for what is underutilized, what is the capacity, can that building, is it flexible enough in terms of its plan? Can it provide an accessible and easy way for the community to gather? But there are, just like with housing, so many buildings that look abandoned, are not utilized. I will think, you know, openly about that.
Okay. What type of income source do they have available?
I can answer that. It all depends on the organization. From one organization to another, the situation is different. Something that Mercy Corps tries to do is that to increase the capacity of the organization while they are transforming into a resilient hub, that they understand the opportunities that they have to have additional incomes. But what do we see in the field? There are community-based organizations that, for example, rent their spaces for community uses. We see community organizations that have farming projects that generate additional income as well. We see organizations that are well structured and they have the capacity to run programs, significant programs. And they are 501c3, for example. They can access different federal sources of funds. So yeah, it all depends, but that's key. If any organization is supporting a community-based organization in Puerto Rico in their transformation to become a resilient center, that part of that is ensuring that they have a sustainable income, because that will be part of ensuring that they can operate that resilient center and all the equipments in a long run and not in short term only.
And the case studies that are featured in the guide do touch on that and show the variety and diversity of examples and ideas.
Yeah. For example, Daguao rents out a big room that they have they rent it out to whomever wants to rent it out for different activities. They sometimes have festivals where they charge, and they have several buildings that they rent out to a Head Start, and that's part of the income they're producing. One of the case studies is Corcovada. Corcovada has their own water system, the community. They never had a system from Praza. So many years ago, one of the first systems developed by communities was in Corcovada, because they had these engineers that lived up there. And so they produce their own water, and they do the invoicing and everything. So, you know, that's part of the whole organization. The group is organized, and on Mondays, the people have from this time to this time to go and pay their invoice.
Okay, the next one, we have 3 questions. From where comes the water source? PRASA, community well, community superficial source. What is the reason to provide filtration to the center?
So for example, in Daguao has water service from PRASA, which is the Puerto Rico Aqueduct and Sewer Authority. But the whole idea with having a water cistern is to serve as a backup water system. So just, you know, the same way we have solar panels and generators to serve backup energy, the water system serves as a backup water system.
And the filtration system is there to provide safe water for potable water for consumption.
Yeah, and I can add to that that as part of having those backup systems, or something that we also work with is building the capacity for the organization to handle water distribution that we all know that is critical. And I can tell you that during this COVID-19 situation, we've been seeing some of the organization doing that and adapting their protocols in the scenario of this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And to add another example, some communities that don't have the opportunity to connect to Prasa, they will make a well, go underground and pump that water out, and that water feeds the cistern. So there are different models depending on the location and the type of connectivity and access to utilities that they might have.
Okay. Could you describe the opportunities for community youth to take an active role?
Should I answer that?
Go ahead.
From the experience that we've seen working with over 15 community centers in Puerto Rico, the youth component is key. There is a lot of opportunity in Puerto Rico to engage youth in community programs, in community initiative moving forward. Let me give you an example. All these resilient hubs are using solar systems that are really modern, water systems that are very modern. There are a lot of technical capacity that is needed to make sure that the Resilient Center operates long run. And that there is the big opportunities there. What we are trying to do is that the youth in the community sees as an opportunity engaging and providing their time to the community center while learning about solar system and using that as a motivation in their career path or interest. So youth is a resource for the community, definitely, and will ensure that the community center keeps working 20 years from now. So it's key. And the example that I can provide you is that when, for example, we do trainings for the solar system, we extend, or the community-based organization extend the invitation to students in the community and do a really good effort to make sure that they are part of those trainings, because they want to engage them, and that these students and these youth become part of the support that the Resilience Center needs every day.
For me, that is a very important question, because resilience cannot be bestowed, it must be taken, and it's a cross-generational effort. And if we can engage our youth, we're not only integrating them and giving them the responsibility to care for their community, we're also taking the opportunity to educate them. And there are so many community centers that have youth centers. So instead of hanging out who knows where, they come to the community center and they hang out there, and you can see what they're doing. You can engage them in a way that they feel that they are part of this community. There are organizations that can partner with community-centered leadership. I'm just going to mention one that is close to my heart. Design Ed for Resilience has been working in Toa Baja with Acutas, and they engage directly with teachers, and they run programs about, okay, let's take high school students, for example, and let's discuss how the students can be agents of change in their community. Let's take a real problem that is a community problem, and they can brainstorm about solving that and being part of the solution.
Okay, we have time for a few more questions. What are the biggest needs for communities and resilience?
Well, I mean, the biggest need after Hurricane Maria was the need for power, right? And power and water and communication. Actually, communication was the big surprise, I guess, because I guess we all knew we were going to lose power. We didn't think it was going to be that long, but the communication issue really, the lack of complete communication really prohibited or inhibited the logistics and the coordination efforts by the government and other support organizations who were trying to support each other. So they realized that it was necessary to have a backup communication system. But the biggest needs are, I would say, are related to power and water services. And we've seen in the last 2.5 years, as I said, many nonprofits, and I have to include here American Red Cross and RMI, who have been providing backup energy, solar power systems and batteries, not only to community centers, but also to many schools in Puerto Rico and many health facilities. And so Red Cross had a project to support 100 schools. And I know that I'm not sure if they've completed the 100 schools up until right now, but they were in the process. So yeah, I mean, I think and we still have a very unstable and a bad condition whole energy transmission and distribution system here in Puerto Rico. We've been assigned a lot of funds to fix the whole T&D system and whole electric generation system, but those funds haven't really started yet. The whole process is very bureaucratic and takes a very long time. So whatever the communities can do on their part to fix their energy systems, it's the best way to go.
Okay, what is the name of the organization going to make funds available for CBOs?
Not sure what.
I think they are referring to CDBG, one of the few of the first slides. Yeah, CDBG.
The CDBG-DR funds is administered by the Department of Housing of Puerto Rico, called Vivienda.
Okay, so we're running over. So, Yanel, do you want me to do one more question and you can close it out?
Perfect.
What has been the best strategy for communicating with the local community?
I think, I'm not sure if I am understanding the question correctly. The best way for us to communicate with local organizations for Mercy Corps has been always partnering with community-based organization and understanding that they are the ones that have the knowledge. I also think that for a resilience center to continue the communication with their immediate community, there are several strategies that they use, and it depends on the community that you visit, but that's a key component as well. I can tell you that for Mercy Corps, working in Puerto Rico, the most important part is working through local organizations and to continue that communication during COVID times. We've been adapting our style, and we do now a lot of Zoom, WhatsApp, and other tools, but we do see that same change in the community-based organization towards their families and their network as well.
I think we can close now, Andrea. Want to mention that Lori had connectivity problems, but she has been listening and texting me to make sure that we know that she's here with us. I want to thank everyone here, because the reason why we were inspired to put together this guide is because we recognize the need, and every organization that you see here brought something different to the table, and unifying our perspective has been instrumental to be able to serve more communities. Next week, same time, we will have a webinar on passive habitability that I think is going to be great. And if you can join at 3 o'clock, the website has the connection to register. And I want to thank you, Malu and Karla, for an excellent discussion. We can keep talking about this forever because we are passionate about this, but if you're in the audience and you are thinking about strengthening the community organizational capacity, or you have questions, please reach out. I'm sure you can Google us or find us in LinkedIn, but we are more than willing and happy to help our lessons learned and our resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.